My name's Elena Brooks. I'm 32 and I own a small auto repair shop on the edge of town. It's not glamorous, grease-stained hands, humming engines, and the faint smell of motor oil clinging to my clothes, but it's mine. Every nut, every bolt, every late night, I spent building it from scratch. It all means something to me. Maybe that's why it still stings that my parents never saw it that way. Growing up, my family wasn't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. My mom, Janice, worked double shifts at a diner, and my dad, Rick, drove trucks across states. We always got by, but barely. Still, when it came to who they spent their energy on, it was always my little brother, Aaron. Aaron, 3 years younger, charming. The kind of kid who smiled once and got away with everything. My parents used to call him the light of our lives. Meanwhile, I was the shadow that kept the lights on. I still remember saving up from babysitting and lawn work to buy a used bike when I was 15. The next week, Dad came home with a brand new mountain bike for Aaron, just because he'd been doing well at school. It wasn't jealousy that hit me back then. It was the quiet realization that my hard work was invisible to the people who should have noticed first. But I learned. I learned to stand on my own. I learned that being self-sufficient was safer than being seen. By the time I turned 27, I'd saved enough to buy my first house, a tiny 2-bedroom fixer-upper at the edge of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I spent months painting walls, sanding floors, fixing every leaky pipe myself. And when it was done, it felt like proof that I didn't need anyone's approval to be proud of what I built. So that year for Thanksgiving, I decided to invite my parents and yes, even Aaron. It had been a while, and despite everything, I wanted them to see me happy, stable. Maybe even equal. Aaron didn't come alone, of course. He arrived with Julia, his girlfriend at the time, tall, perfectly dressed, and the kind of woman who made everyone feel underdressed just by existing. She was in real estate, apparently doing quite well for herself. I greeted them at the door with a smile that felt too heavy for my face. The moment Aaron walked in, he scanned my little house like it was a museum exhibit of things he'd never want. "It's cozy," he said, glancing at Julia, who smirked softly. I laughed it off. Tried to play hostess, tried to ignore the little barbs, how the neighborhood was a bit rough, how my kitchen was so quaint. But with every word, my stomach tightened. Then came the part that pushed me over the edge. Over dinner, Aaron started bragging about Julia's condo downtown, floor-to-ceiling windows, concierge service, private gym. I smiled politely until he turned to me and said, "You know, Lena, if you'd finished college like Mom wanted, maybe you could have afforded a place like that too." My fork froze midair. Mom and Dad stayed quiet, pretending not to hear it. I set my fork down gently and looked him straight in the eye. "At least I bought my house with my own money, Aaron. Didn't need anyone's help to do it." He blinked, caught off guard, but before he could respond, I added quietly, "Can you say the same?" The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting match. Julia looked away, embarrassed. Dad cleared his throat. Mom reached for her wine. Aaron stood up. "You know what? Forget it. I don't need this negativity," he muttered, motioning for Julia to leave. I didn't stop him, not this time. As the door slammed shut, Mom whispered, "You didn't have to make a scene." I smiled a small brittle smile. Maybe I finally did. That night, as I sat alone at the table, surrounded by cold leftovers and half-empty glasses, I realized something. For years, I'd been chasing their approval, trying to be seen. But all they ever saw was Aaron. When he walked out of my house that Thanksgiving, I thought I'd lost my brother. What I didn't realize was that I'd finally found myself. Still, I had no idea that moment would be the start of something much bigger, because 5 years later, he'd come back into my life, dragging all the old ghosts with him. That night, when Aaron stormed out of my house, I didn't know it'd be 5 years before I saw him again. 5 years. That's how long it had been since that Thanksgiving dinner, the night my brother Aaron walked out of my life without looking back. 5 years of silence. No calls, no texts, not even a birthday message. And honestly, I was fine with it. My life had quieted down. The shop was doing well, I'd paid off most of my mortgage, and the only drama I dealt with was when an engine refused to start. Then, one Thursday evening, my phone buzzed. Mom's name lit up on the screen. I hesitated before answering. Calls from her were unpredictable. Sometimes warm, sometimes guilt-laced, but always about Aaron. Still I answered. "Elena, we need to talk." Those 5 words instantly told me it wasn't good news. My chest tightened as I asked, "Is Dad okay?" Yes, he's fine. It's not that. It's your brother." Of course it was. Apparently, Aaron was getting married to Julia. The same Julia who'd looked down on my old house like it was a charity project. I took a slow breath, forcing my tone to stay even. That's nice. I'm happy for him, I said, knowing I didn't mean it. But Mom wasn't done. She kept talking about how big the wedding would be, lavish venue designer flower string quartet, open bar, the whole deal. The kind of wedding where the cake costs more than my entire kitchen renovation. Then she said something that made me go cold. Elena, we promised Aaron and Julia we'd pay for the venue and decorations. But we're a little short. We were hoping you could help us out. I actually laughed one of those stunned, disbelieving laughs that don't sound like joy. Wait, you want me to pay for Aaron's wedding? Mom's tone softened into that pleading register she always used when she knew she was overstepping. Not all of it, honey. Just help us cover the rest. You're doing well now, aren't you? My throat tightened. You mean the wedding of the brother who hasn't spoken to me in 5 years? That wedding. Elena, she sighed. He's still your brother. Family helps family. Something inside me snapped a little. Family helps family, I repeated quietly. Where was that family when I was working double shifts just to pay for trade school? When my car broke down and I had to walk to work for a month? You told me you couldn't help back then. Remember? There was silence on the line. Then Mom whispered, that was different. No, I said, it wasn't. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then she added, Elena, you don't understand. Julia's parents are paying for most of the wedding already. We just don't want to look like we can't support our son in front of them. And there it was, the truth. It wasn't about love or family. It was about appearance. I took a deep breath and said, if you can't afford it, don't promise it. I'm not giving you a cent. Elena, no, Mom. I mean it. I'm not doing this. I hung up before she could say another word. For the rest of the night, I couldn't stop pacing. My chest burned with that old familiar ache, resentment, mixed with disbelief. After everything, they still treated Aaron's comfort like a family emergency. A week later, my phone rang again. This time it was Dad. Elena, I heard you talk to your mother, he said. His voice had that deep, deliberate calm that always came before he tried to guilt me into something. I did, I said flatly. He sighed. Look, we're in a tight spot. We already made promises to Aaron and Julia. If we don't deliver, it'll look bad. We just need you to help out a little, that's all. I let out a short, bitter laugh. You're worried about how it looks, Dad. This isn't about appearances. It's about priorities, and it's clear where I rank. Elena, he said firmly, you're being unfair. We've always tried to do what's best for both of you. No, I said quietly, you did what was best for him. Always him. There was a long pause. Then he muttered, you'll regret it if you turn your back on family. That line, turning your back on family, hit a nerve. Because for years, I was the one holding this family together. The one who never turned away no matter how much it hurt. So I said, I'm not turning my back. I'm just tired of being the only one facing forward. The line went dead. That night, I sat alone in my garage watching rain hit the cracked pavement outside. I'd told myself I was over it, that I'd moved on. But deep down, the little girl who once begged her parents to notice her still wanted to scream. And somewhere in that storm, I made a quiet promise to myself. If they wanted to treat me like the outsider, I'd show them what it really meant to stand alone. I didn't know it then, but that decision was the beginning of everything that came next. For once, I wanted to see how far they'd go to keep pretending Aaron was perfect. A few days after that phone call with Dad, things went strangely quiet. No texts, no messages, no guilt trips. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd accepted my decision. I should have known better. It started with my cousin Maya. We'd always gotten along. She was one of the few relatives who didn't play favorites. So when her name popped up on my phone, I answered without thinking. Elena, what's going on with your parents? She asked immediately. I frowned. What do you mean? I just got off the phone with your mom. She's really upset. She said you refused to help with Aaron's wedding. The whole family's talking about it. I froze. They told the family. Maya hesitated. Yeah. Apparently everyone thinks you're being cold. They said you're still holding grudges from years ago. My stomach dropped. Of course. When my parents didn't get what they wanted, they didn't stop. They recruited. Unbelievable, I muttered. They're leaving out the part where they asked me to pay for a wedding I wasn't even invited to help plan. Maya sighed softly. I figured there was more to it. That's why I called you. I just wanted to hear your side. I told her everything, how Mom and Dad begged for money, how they guilt-tripped me, how I stood my ground. Maya listened quietly the whole time. When I finished, she said, I get it, Elena. I really do. But you know how they are. They hate looking bad in front of everyone. Right now, they're embarrassed. I let out a bitter laugh, so their solution is to humiliate me instead. Maya didn't respond right away. You're not the villain here, Elena. But they're making it sound like you abandoned the family. Everyone's got opinions. Let them, I said sharply. If they want to gossip, I'll give them something real to talk about. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at my phone. The anger was simmering quiet, steady too heavy to hold in, so I did something impulsive. I opened the family group chat, and I typed, "Hey everyone, just to clear the air, yes, Mom and Dad asked me to help pay for Aaron's wedding." No, I'm not helping. I haven't spoken to Aaron in 5 years, and it doesn't make sense for me to pay for something I'm not part of. I'm not being selfish, I'm setting boundaries, that's all. I stared at the message for a long moment before hitting send. For about 5 minutes, nothing happened. Then my phone lit up like fireworks. First came the sympathetic messages, cousins saying, "We understand and family stuff is hard." Then came the others. My Uncle Gary, the self-appointed family moral compass, sent a long paragraph about how family means sacrifice and how helping your brother on his big day shouldn't be up for debate. Then came my Aunt Janet typing with that passive-aggressive sweetness she was famous for. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm sure you don't mean to sound so bitter. Your parents have done their best. Maybe this is a chance to heal old wounds instead of opening new ones." I gritted my teeth, resisting the urge to reply. But then my phone rang. It was Mom. "Elena, what the hell is this message you sent?" I kept my tone calm. "It's called setting the record straight, Mom. You embarrassed us. Everyone's calling me, asking what's going on." "Maybe because you started telling people your version first," I shot back. "You made me look like some ungrateful brat when you know that's not true." "I didn't lie," she snapped. "You are refusing to help." I clenched my jaw. "I am refusing to enable your obsession with appearances." There was a pause. Then in that voice, half hurt, half anger, she said, "You're turning your back on your family, Elena. One day you'll regret this." Something in me cracked. My voice was quiet, but it trembled with years of held-back pain. "No, Mom. I already regret all the years I spent trying to earn a family that never wanted to see me." She went silent. Then the line went dead. After that, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Relatives calling, texting, chiming in with advice I never asked for. Some told me to apologize. Some told me to ignore it. A few said they understood, but you could tell they didn't want to get involved. By midnight, I turned my phone off completely. The house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your ears. I sat there staring at the family photo on my shelf, one from when Aaron and I were kids. Mom's hand was on his shoulder. I was standing beside them just outside her reach. Maybe it had always been that way. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. Dozens of missed calls, but one name stopped me cold. Aaron. I stared at his text for nearly a minute before opening it. "Can we talk?" That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just 3 words that reopened 5 years of silence. Part of me wanted to ignore it. The other part, the one that still remembered the sound of him laughing in the backyard when we were kids, couldn't. I typed one word back, "Sure." And just like that, the door I swore I'd closed creaked open again. I barely slept that night after replying to Aaron. 5 years of silence, and now he wanted to talk. No explanation, no apology, no emotion. Just that one short message. By morning, I'd convinced myself it wasn't worth it. He probably wanted something. Maybe Mom had put him up to it. But deep down, curiosity gnawed at me, like rust on metal. Around noon, another text arrived. "Can we meet tomorrow, coffee?" I'd rather not do this over text. It took me 5 minutes to reply. "Fine, where?" We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown. The kind of quiet place people go to talk about things that matter or fall apart entirely. The next afternoon, I pulled up outside the cafe. My hands gripped the steering wheel longer than they should have. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked older than I remembered. Like those 5 years hadn't just passed, they'd weighed me down. When I finally walked in, I spotted Aaron instantly. He was already there, sitting at a corner table, nursing a half-empty coffee cup. He looked good, better than I expected. Crisp shirt, gold watch, confident posture. But the moment he looked up, I saw it hesitation. A flicker of guilt hiding behind the charm. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. The air between us was thick, heavy, with all the words we'd never said. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he admitted. "Neither was I said. A small smile tugged at his lips. "You look the same." I didn't return it. "You don't." He exhaled, looking down. "Yeah, a lot's changed." There was a pause long enough for me to hear the hum of the coffee machine, the quiet clinking of spoons. Finally, he said, "I know I don't deserve much of your time, but I wanted to say I'm sorry." I blinked, caught off guard. "Sorry, for what exactly? For Thanksgiving? For how I acted? For the things I said?" He leaned forward slightly, his tone softer. You didn't deserve that. You worked hard for everything you have, and I made fun of it because, I don't know, I thought I was better than you. I stayed silent. I'd imagined this moment 100 times, him apologizing me, feeling relief. But standing there, I felt nothing but guardedness. He went on, I guess I thought if I ignored how hard you worked, I didn't have to face how easy I had it. That one hit. For a moment, I saw flashes of our childhood, the time I fixed his bike while he watched cartoons, the time he got the lead role in a school play while I wasn't even invited to the after party. You really hurt me that day, Aaron, I said quietly. You didn't just insult my house. You made me feel small, like I'd never be enough no matter how hard I tried. His jaw tightened and he nodded. I know, and I've wanted to tell you that for a while. I just didn't know how to reach out. I almost believed him. Almost. But then he hesitated. That same nervous twitch he used to get when he was hiding something flickered in his expression. What is it, I asked? He rubbed the back of his neck. Mom and Dad told me what happened. About the wedding. My spine stiffened. Of course they did. He raised his hands slightly like he was trying to calm me down. Look, I get why you said no. I really do. But they're struggling. They took out a small loan to pay for everything. They didn't expect it to be this expensive. There it was, the catch. So this isn't about closure, I said flatly. You came here to ask me for money. No, he said quickly. That's not what I interrupted. Because it sure sounds like you're trying to soften me up. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I just thought maybe if we talked, things would feel different. That maybe we could start over. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Start over 5 years later, right when the bills are due. Convenient timing. Elena, he said, frustration creeping into his voice. This isn't fair. I'm trying. You're always trying when you need something, I snapped. But when I needed family, you were gone. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The hum of the cafe swallowed our silence. Finally, he said quietly, Julia really wanted me to make peace with you. Of course, Julia, the real reason for all this. So that's it, I said, standing up. Your fiancé wants to check off sibling reconciliation before the wedding photos. Elena, wait. No, I said firmly. You said what you needed to. I said what I needed to. Let's not pretend this changes anything. I turned to leave. My hands trembled, but my steps didn't falter. As I reached the door, he said something that stopped me cold. They used your name, you know. I turned back slowly. What? He looked pale. Mom and Dad. They put your name on part of the payment paperwork. As a guarantor. They said it was just temporary. The world tilted for a second. You're kidding. I wish I was. My heart pounded in my ears. Every sound in the cafe faded out. My parents, who'd spent my entire life overlooking me, had no problem using my name when it suited them. I didn't remember walking out of the cafe. I just remembered the cold wind outside biting at my face and the taste of betrayal settling on my tongue like metal. When I got home from that meeting with Aaron, I sat in my car for a long time. The keys were still in the ignition engine off my hands, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. They used my name. The words kept replaying in my head like a broken radio signal. Mom and Dad, the people who always said, we'd never put you in a bad spot, honey. The same people who couldn't even lend me $50 back in trade school had somehow thought it was fine to sign my name onto a wedding contract for their precious son. I checked my email just to be sure, and there it was. A message from the event company. Subject line, final reminder. Outstanding balance, Brooke's wedding. The pit in my stomach deepened as I opened it. My full name, my address, and next to it, a note saying, as agreed, Ms. Brooks is listed as the financial guarantor for this event. I felt my heart drop. They hadn't just used my name, they'd forged my signature. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. My mind was calm, but not peaceful. There's a difference. Calm is what happens when the storm is waiting for you to open your mouth. Mom answered the door, eyes widening like she hadn't expected me. Elena, you didn't call. I stepped inside. We need to talk. Dad was in the living room, half standing when he saw me. Sweetheart, what's wrong? What's wrong? I pulled out my phone, opened the email, and shoved it toward him. That's what's wrong. He blinked. What is... You used my name, I said, my voice cracking, not with tears, but fury. You signed me onto a contract I never agreed to. You forged my signature. Mom's face went pale. Elena, listen, it's not what you think. No, because it looks like fraud to me. Dad rubbed his temples. It's not fraud, it's family. We were short on credit, and you've got good standing with the bank. We just needed a name. A name, I repeated, my laugh hollow. You needed a name. Not help, not understanding. Just my name to clean up your mess. Mom reached out, tears brimming in her eyes. Honey, we were going to tell you. We just didn't want to upset you before the wedding. I stepped back. You didn't want to upset me. You forged my signature, Mom. Do you have any idea what could happen if they file this legally? Dad snapped suddenly, his voice hard. Enough, Elena. You're overreacting. We did what we had to do for the family. You should be proud to help your brother. Something inside me finally broke. Proud, I whispered. I was proud when I built my own house. I was proud when I fixed cars no one else could. I was proud when I stood on my own. You didn't care then. But now that I'm useful, suddenly I'm family again. Mom's tears spilled. Please don't make this harder than it is. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Once it's over, we'll pay everything back. I promise. I shook my head slowly. You don't understand, do you? It's not about the money. It's about the line you just crossed. That afternoon, I drove straight to the venue. The receptionist greeted me politely, unaware of the war raging behind my calm expression. Hi, I said, forcing a smile. I'm here about the Brooks wedding. I'd like to withdraw my name as guarantor. Her smile faltered. Oh, ma'am, that might not be possible. The agreement was already processed. Then consider this my formal statement that the signature is forged, I said, sliding my ID across the counter. If this goes any further, my lawyer will be in touch. The woman blinked, nodded, and took my statement. By the time I left, my heart was pounding, but for the first time, I felt something close to freedom. That night, Aaron showed up at my house. No text, no call, just pounding on my front door. When I opened it, he stormed in furious. What the hell did you do? I crossed my arms. You'll have to be more specific. You told the venue to cancel Mom and Dad's payment. I told them my signature was forged, I corrected. That's called protecting myself, Aaron. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. Do you have any idea what kind of mess this causes? The wedding's in 2 weeks. Everything's falling apart. Mom's crying. Dad's furious. Julia's losing it. I cut him off. Good. Maybe it's time things fell apart. He froze. Wow. You're really enjoying this, huh? Watching your family struggle. Struggle, I snapped. You mean the people who've been treating me like a backup credit card since I was old enough to work? Don't twist this, Aaron. I didn't ruin your wedding. Mom and Dad did that when they dragged me into it without my consent. He shook his head, disbelief twisting his features. You've changed. No, I said quietly. I finally stopped apologizing. He stared at me for a long time, chest rising and falling fast. Then he muttered, You're unbelievable, and walked out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. The silence that followed was suffocating. But it wasn't guilt that filled the room, it was clarity. For years, I'd been the background character in their perfect family picture. The quiet daughter, the dependable one, the name they used when it was convenient. Not anymore. I cleaned my kitchen counter, made myself tea, and sat by the window, watching headlights flash past the street outside. The phone buzzed a few times, Mom, Dad, even Julia, but I didn't answer. By midnight, everything was still again. I thought it was over, but the next morning there was a knock on my garage door. When I opened it, Julia stood there alone, still in her wedding prep makeup, eyes puffy from crying. Elena, she said softly, please, I need to talk to you. Julia looked nothing like the polished, composed woman I remembered. Her hair was messy, her eyes red, and her hands shook as she clutched her bag. When she stepped into my garage, the scent of oil and metal seemed to swallow her perfume whole, like she didn't belong here but somehow needed to be. I leaned against the workbench, wiping grease off my palms. If you're here to guilt me into fixing your wedding, save your breath. She shook her head quickly. No, that's not why I came. There was a pause. Her lips trembled as she took a shaky breath. It's Aaron. He's not who you think he is. I frowned. You think I don't know my own brother? Her voice cracked. No, I think you know him too well. She sat on the stool across from me, her voice unsteady as she spoke. He's been lying to everyone, she began. To me, to your parents. About everything. The condo, the business, even his savings. Half of what he told me wasn't true. I stayed quiet, but my stomach turned. Julia swallowed hard. He's in debt, Elena. A lot of it. He maxed out credit cards months ago, took out personal loans under his name and others. When we started planning the wedding, he said your parents were covering half the cost. But when they couldn't, he told them you would. My breath caught. He said what? He told them you'd offered to help, she said, her voice trembling, that you insisted on it to make peace. So when your parents signed your name, they thought they were following your lead. I felt like the floor had shifted under me. For a second, I couldn't even form words. Julia's eyes welled up. When I found out, I confronted him. He said he'd fix it, that he just needed time, but instead he tried to blame your parents. Then, when everything fell apart after you called the venue, he broke down. He said the wedding wasn't even about love anymore. It was about proving he was better than you. The words hit me harder than I expected. Better than me. Even after everything, the job, the house, the independence, Aaron still saw life as a competition I never signed up for. I sank onto the stool beside her, staring at the grease stains on the floor. So all of this, Mom's begging Dad's loans, the gossip, it started with one lie. Julia nodded, tears spilling now. I thought I was marrying someone ambitious. Turns out he was desperate. He needed that wedding to look perfect because without it, everyone would see the cracks. There was a long silence between us. The hum of the old fluorescent light above us filled the air. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know I've been cold to you. I believed everything he said about you, how you were jealous, difficult, ungrateful. But now, I think you're the only one who ever saw him clearly. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to being believed. Finally, I nodded. You don't owe me an apology, but you do owe yourself the truth. Don't tie yourself to someone who builds their life on lies. Julia nodded weakly. I already called off the wedding this morning. I just thought you deserved to know. After she left, I stayed in the garage long after the engine stopped humming. The quiet wasn't empty. It was clean, like a wound finally starting to close. When I looked around, everything was still the same. The half-fixed car, the oil-stained floor, the faded photo of me and Aaron as kids pinned to the corkboard. But somehow I saw it differently. For years, I'd thought my family's love was something I had to earn, that if I just worked harder, stayed calmer, gave more, they'd finally see me. But they never did. And that was okay, because I finally saw myself. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the town, my phone buzzed on the workbench. A new message. Dad, Elena, we're sorry for everything. We know now it wasn't right. Take care of yourself. I stared at it for a while, then set the phone down without replying. Outside, the orange light from the sunset spilled across the garage floor, touching the wrenches, the glass jars, the quiet pieces of my life that I'd built on my own. I smiled, not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped fighting a battle that was never mine to begin with. I was never the golden child. I was the one in the shadows, fixing what broke and building what lasted. Turns out that's where the light really was all along. The wind moved through the open garage door, carrying away the last traces of anger, leaving only stillness. I was never the golden child, but I built my own light, and it finally stopped flickering.